Hello, good morning to all. We are here for the third and last webinar of these 3 very exciting days. Today we will see what are the European policies to tackle energy poverty. Before we start, just the usual technical information about the webinar. The webinar is being recorded. You will be able to have the list of all the recordings of the 3 days on our website. There will be also an infographic for each of the 3 webinars. You have the chat where you can interact with the other participants, and for the questions to the speakers, please use the Q&A box, which you find on the bottom banner. So yesterday I presented the results of the ASIS project. What I would like to very briefly show to you today before we start is let me see if I can manage it. Is to guide you through our website very briefly. So this is the website of ASIS. You have the national sections. In the European section, which has been built to reach all participants, all the interested stakeholders from all over Europe, you find the details of the project, and on the page results divided for the various activities, you find all the deliverables. Just to give you an example, you have here the deliverables prepared within the ASIS project, which I invite you to download. And if you have any questions on the deliverables, please do not hesitate to contact us. You can find, you will be able to find everything on the final conference, on the page of the final conference. That is the slides that have been used by the speakers, the daily digest of the 3 webinars, the registration links, and everything will be available here on the final conference. So that was my part for today. I would like now to give the floor to Mathias. Thank him very much. Thank him and all the speakers of the roundtable for participating today. And I'm sure we will have a very exciting final webinar. Thank you. Thank you all, Mathias. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Marina. You are the project coordinator of the ASSIST project. My name is Matthias Maucher. I work for the European Anti-Poverty Network in Brussels as policy officer, working there a lot on questions related to minimum income, minimum wage, education, training, employment, but also energy poverty, the topic of today, or how can we prevent, how can we reduce energy poverty and the number of vulnerable consumers across Europe. So thank you for joining us. Just when Marina spoke, I saw that we already are around 90 participants. I know that on the first day there were about 140. The first day was really dedicated to the presentation of local initiatives and social innovations to reduce and prevent energy poverty and precarity. The day yesterday, the second day, where also Marina spoke and presented main outcomes of the ASSIST project, was dedicated to the presentation of a number of Horizon 2020 funded projects by the executive agency there for small and medium-sized enterprises of the European Commission. The ASSIST project, the STEP project, the projects related to energy cooperatives and their initiatives, a project or report by FIANZA, the European Federation of Homeless People, and Fondation Abbé Pierre, giving an overview on the regulatory framework nationally and at European level and tools to combat energy poverty. And today, as Marina said, we are now more looking into the EU level policy frame, regulatory frame, how we can use recommendations and proposals from this project to also change the policies, influence the policies, the regulatory framework, that it can be used to help vulnerable consumers, as I said, to reduce their number. So Marina already explained that you can use the question and answer function if you want to ask questions. It's supported by our colleague Virginia Mata from Eco Surveys, my colleague Florence Tornin-Casa from EAPN, our project officer, is behind the chat function, and I think we have Alejandro Gil, who is a visual artist who will also help us translating the contents of the debates and the presentations into some nice visuals helpful for the dissemination later also on the webpage of the project, as Marina explained. So if you allow me, before I hand over, we have a dedicated panel with a presentation from the Maria Jeliazkova from EAPN Bulgaria and other functions. Give me still 2 or 3 minutes to set the scene, and then I give to Maria, and then we will go into 2 rounds with the 4 panelists that I will introduce when we are there. So again, we are talking today about the reduction of energy poverty. And I think we can start with saying that at European level, there is not the one and only single definition of energy poverty. Normally, if we speak about energy poverty, we refer to situations where persons, households are not able to heat or fuel their home in an acceptable standard at an affordable cost. And so that also means the definition is linked to the household's inability to pay their energy bills for heating, cooking, cooling, lighting, all this. And it's also obviously linked to questions of affordability of energy prices, energy services, and that households receive energy, the adequate amount of energy for affordable prices without falling into debt, without being indebted. And energy poverty normally also means there is an inadequacy, a non-adequacy of energy supply to ensure basic comfort. And its last remark before I hand over to Maria, whom are we talking about? How many European citizens around are affected? And there we have data of 2-3 years ago, where we would see that about 1 out of 10 Europeans, at least across the year, has difficulties, and here in the winter, to warm their homes. About 8% of European citizens declared that they cannot adequately heat their homes. And there are several countries where this share is more than double, like Bulgaria, Greece, Cyprus, Lithuania, Portugal. And especially if we look into households that are living below the poverty line, then this number normally is double. And we also have obviously an impact on the health of people, on the physical health. Energy poverty means more illnesses, more respiratory diseases. It also has an impact on mental health, more stress. It's linked to stigma. There is a risk of more domestic violence if you have to live for a long time in an energy poor situation. And we have about 100,000 deaths in winter caused by energy poverty. So we have seen that at least between 2000 and 2015, prices for energy went up by about 70% in real terms, and that also reflects the share of low-income families that are in troubles due to their energy bills. We have seen that between 2004 and about 2016, the share of the population paying utility bills grew, that have to pay them late grew by 40%, with millions of arrears in paying bills, and millions, about 7 million, I thought in 2016, are threatened by the risks of disconnection or having been disconnected. But this should give the frame for our exchange today about the EU policy framework, the regulatory framework to tackle energy poverty and to protect vulnerable consumers. And the first person that I would ask to speak is EAPN colleague also from Bulgaria in the executive committee. She is a researcher, has worked a lot on obviously anti-poverty, social exclusion issues, social integration issues, also the energy poverty issues. She is associated professor in Sofia University and also member of the National Consultative Committee for Social Inclusion in the Council of Ministers in Bulgaria. So broad research and policy framework and work with anti-poverty organizations in Bulgaria and Europe. So I would like you, please, to introduce, Maria, the proposals, the recommendations from the project before we then hand over to the panelists to comment them in a first round. So please, thank you for the intention, and Maria, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I hope you hear me. It was very interesting to listen the 2 days before the different presentations from different countries, from different panelists presenting different stakeholders' view. And I would say that some common and shared visions could be already traced. So I now will try to very briefly present the basic points in the framework paper, in the Vulnerable Consumers Protection Framework paper. I hope so. So the Vulnerable Consumers Protection Framework paper is basically making policy proposals to improve the way energy poverty and consumers' vulnerability are addressed. It's important to state that it has evolved from the joint activities of the partnership within ASSIST project. It was discussed at 39 meetings with the 3 rounds of steering committees and market actors dialogues that Marina presented, I think, in the first day. And it was enriched by the main conclusions linked to the different activities in ASSIST, that is research, training, networking, and in-field action. Preliminary results of the framework paper were also already presented to some events like the Energy Poverty Congress in Barcelona, set plans in Bratislava, EU Energy Week in Brussels last year, in order to consider to what extent we are in line or differ with different voices and different views. It consists of 3 parts. In the first 2 parts, we have tried to make a review and analysis of the current state of policy interventions in order to ground our proposals for improvements in the policies that tackle energy poverty. So I briefly go to that. When we review and assess current policy interventions, it's necessary to say that the risk of energy poverty is identified as a socially significant risk. It has received political recognition, and a complex of some policy measures is in place to address it. However, when we go to the analysis of the risk, it's important to say that some important causes of energy poverty are not identified, and their impact is not usually adequately addressed. So, on the basis of such narrow analysis, the formulated policy measures are quite narrow as well. The most important, most widespread and significant measures, which are extremely important, are the financial support to individuals and families at risk of energy poverty. They are extremely important, but they are aimed at mitigating the effects of the risk. and not to eradicate energy poverty, not at its root causes. So the scope of the measures and the strength of their impact are not sufficient. When we go to the implementation phase of already formulated policies measures, the assessments are more favorable. Although they suggest that there is room for better collaboration between main actors. And the last stage in this review and assessment of policy interventions, we need to say that sound evaluations of policy measures against energy poverty are rare, partial, and limited. On this background, we have also tried to assess the project-based interventions, having in mind different EU projects and using this mechanism of learning by doing, assessing with SWOT analysis and lessons learned from the activities that we undertook in ASSIST project. So we can enlist different project outcomes from these projects: better informed consumers, including to some extent vulnerable consumers, more developed qualifications through trainings, better knowledge on energy poverty, created networks of different stakeholders, and more informed policy proposals. Still, the question to what extent projects have really contributed to the decrease of energy poverty remains open, because the projects echo many of the weaknesses of policy interventions and are limited by their boundaries. So we guess that if projects are based and embedded in a different and more efficient policy framework, they could be much more useful. And there is no clear mechanism how to incorporate positive outcomes from projects in policy interventions and in the whole framework. So based on this review and assessment of policy interventions and project-based interventions, we have derived many policy proposals that we have classified in 6 basic types, or 6 areas that we consider that need much more focus. So I'm going now shortly to present these different areas. The first one is linked to the direct drivers of energy poverty, very well known as incomes, prices, and quality of housing. Considering this, we think that current measures rarely address the problem of energy price formation, and this needs much more careful monitoring. Considering incomes, usually the level of support is assessed as insufficient, so we need regularly assessment and update incomes and levels of social benefits. The third one, there is need of targeted support for improving the energy efficiency of houses, especially of energy vulnerable households. And another problem linked to these drivers is that they are fragmented. The partialization is counterproductive. There is necessity to better link the focus between the 3 drivers. The next type of measures that we consider very important is the efficiency of energy market. In this area, we would say that there is need of much more careful monitoring on the way energy markets are constructed, the existing regulations and the regulations, and how they perform. What is the real level of competitiveness or natural monopolies, and how markets shape energy prices. There is need of much more transparent information on business practices and on illegitimate business practices as well. And because there is a concentration trend in energy market. We need stimuli for deconcentration trends, such as changing the forms of ownership, stimulating energy cooperatives and prosumers. The third area, the third focus, could be said that this is the weakest area in the current measures. This is the consistency of different policies. It could be said that some policies, some current policies, some current policy fields of actions do generate energy poverty. Others try to alleviate it, and still others suffer from the situation of energy poverty and have to pay the price. So among these policies that do generate energy poverty, we could enlist the employment policies, the quality of jobs, the insufficient attention to adequate minimum incomes, the so-called retrenchment of the welfare state, and the fact that the just transition to clean energy requires clear estimates and fair distribution of financial burden, basically through general progressive taxation, instead by the current levies applied to energy bills. So social justice and environmental concerns need to be considered together. Healthcare is a typical example of a sphere that suffers and has to pay the social price for energy poverty. And when we consider consistency of different policies, it's very important to have in mind the timing, because faster rate of transition to production of energy from renewable sources compared to the rates of consumers' incomes could paralyze both areas. The next one is linked to the decision-making process. It could be suggested that the narrow political policy measures available reflect narrow circle of stakeholders included in the decision-making mechanism. So there need to have special efforts to expand participation in the political decision-making process, especially of vulnerable consumers and organizations that represent them, to strengthen the role of intermediaries, to better and meaningfully engage with policies formulation and implementation different actors, and to try to transmit energy advice from below, which is linked to our next area, necessary focus. This is strengthening and intensifying the knowledge base. In fact, it could be said that there is a huge wealth of knowledge available that is not adequately used. There are plenty outcomes from research projects, from action projects like ASSIST, from what we call experienced experts, people that are in energy poverty and vulnerable consumers. And this knowledge is not used to base the evidence-based policies. So in that regard, we think we need much more social impact assessments, including participatory assessments, evaluations to identify unexpected and undesirable effects of different policies, and to provide feedback from the evaluation into the identification stage of policy formation. The last but not least of our areas that need to be focused is the better integration at the different levels. There are already proofs that EU policy recommendations have mobilizing effect, but there is need for more attention to provide at EU level clearer guidelines and indicators to help EU member states to elaborate their national definitions, perhaps to establish national energy poverty observatories that could cooperate with the EU energy poverty observatories and provide much more and improved database transparency and networking. And additionally, because good practices are considered to be a basic element in the EU open method of coordination, it is necessary to say that different databases of good practices are established, but the mechanism, the stimuli to transfer lessons from member states, for example, with low levels of energy poverty and vulnerability, like Finland, to those member states with high and persistent energy poverty levels, this mechanism, such mechanisms are not developed. We need mechanisms for real transfers. Coming to the conclusion, I will stress again that sound public policies needs to better integrate cognitive basis and moral dimension in the field of energy poverty. That's why we need a new policy mix to address consistently the different areas that I outlined. Such a new policy mix could profit from what could be called energy welfare, a concept to incorporate a good consumer's purchasing power instead of the current divide between incomes and prices, good quality of homes, and affordability of using clean energy. So with this necessary new policy mix, we could try to imagine a new highway to energy welfare. Of course, the different EU countries are at very different distances from this highway. For example, if we take the broad measures with a very well developed welfare system in Finland, they are much more advanced. But so depending on clear recognition of successes and failures in different countries, they need quite different steps and efforts to climb on this highway. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Maria, for this very instructive overview, and also thank you for keeping the 15 minutes. So we are really very well in time. And I think it was very much worthwhile looking into the different recommendations, because now it's the time, and I will bring you in afterwards, if you like, Maria, please, because you are the expert. You have put together the policy framework paper and the recommendations and the proposals. Thanks for this. I think it was important that you linked in the beginning the topic of energy poverty, precarity, with issues of minimum income, employment, participation in the labor market, employment quality, housing, and health. And then obviously always the thorny issue, how can you translate insights from projects that are in some countries on certain issues into policy? How can you use this? That's always the big challenge. And then you have developed on 6 areas of recommendations: policy consistency, energy market, obviously the participation of those that are vulnerable, the vulnerable consumers, the energy poor, the improvement of the policy cycle, and also what is needed as binding regulatory framework, policy framework at EU level to underpin this. So if it's fine with you, Maria, I would then like to go now and bring in our panelists. And the idea is that we have 2 rounds, and then please, participants, you can always start now already asking questions via the question and answer function, and they will be moderated by Virginia, and I might like after the first round now already take up some questions. So the first round, we agreed with the panelists, is now, as we are in a final conference of a project, we would ask the panelists to react to the set of recommendations that you have done, and from their perspective, from the perspective of their organization, the experience, what they work on, to inform us if they look into these recommendations and the outcomes, what for them are the most important recommendations, which are the ones they would like to support, to take up, or when they, if they would like to say there's also something we really would like not to support. So reacting to this in the first round, and in the second round, we would then look into the policy hooks at EU level to really, for example, also bring in the recommendations, the proposals from the project into policy. So I would like to start now in this first round, where we ask the panelists, the 4 panelists that are very well anchored in the EU policy making, decision-making process. I would ask you 5-6 minutes, each of you, if it's possible, to react to the presentation, to react to the project results. And we will start with the member of the European Parliament, with Cornelia Ernst from Germany. She is member of Die Linke. So in the group GUE NGL, she is there in the European Parliament already, I think, in the 3rd mandate since 2009, has worked a lot on civic rights, on gender, on climate, on energy, and she has also spoken in plenary meetings on the energy market, on energy union, energy poverty. And for EAPN, it was interesting and nice to see, at least, that on the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty in 2018, you very much highlighted the right to energy. So Cornelia, if you can take 5-6 minutes, please, to come in. Also, I think in your quality as spokesperson of Die Linke on energy, at least earlier, that would be kind, and react, if it's possible, first on the recommendations of the project. The floor is yours. Bitte sehr.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here, and I will do my best with the time. Okay. First, I would like to say something about the right to energy. I think if we look in the last months, we can all say the COVID pandemic reinforced the energy poverty. And we all know that, and we can see it in our cities and where we are living. And in view of the digitalization of our society, energy has become a precondition for participation in cultural, social, and economic life. And people without digital bases are out. That's why we have a strong connection between digital bases and the energy question. COVID pandemic highlighted that the energy consumption is to a large degree not an individual choice, but a basic requirement for participation in modern society. And I think we have to keep it in our minds and make it to a basis for our policy, not only on the European level, but also on the level national and other levels. The pressure on energy poor households will increase as part of the EU digital agenda, I said it, and consequently, access to energy must be treated as a right of citizens, the right of citizens. And the right, that means I have also the possibility to appeal if I have the case of dispute. And during the COVID pandemic, some member states already introduced temporary bans on energy disconnections. We know that from Belgium, sometimes from the UK and Spain. These are not, and Belgium, not so bad examples. And precarious situations require immediate support. Around Europe, governments are rolling out the emergency measures, many including flexibility on payment of energy bills and temporary moratoriums on disconnections. It's high time to speak about right to energy in EU law and to ban disconnections. We tried it to arrive in the last 5 years, single energy market and in other files, but it was not possible. We couldn't get the majority for that. But we need a legal basis for banning disconnections, and that's why we speak about for we speak about the right to energy in the EU climate law. There, I'm also the shadow for our group. So, and let me say something about your paper regarding the recommendation of the project. I will do it very brief. Citizen empowerment. With regard to your recommendation, I agree with the points that empower citizens to escape energy poverty. I think it's totally clear. Especially important are minimum wages that are high enough to afford a decent and healthy life. We have fought for that for many, many years, and we think the debate was fruitful. And in these times, many powers on the European level speak about the minimum wages in the member states. Stimulating new forms of ownership like energy cooperatives are also a key to empowering citizens. Point 2.3 on energy market. Empowerment is important to a democratic society. That's why we need a right to energy and not, and this is a difference to your paper, energy welfare. We should discuss it. We think right to energy is a better formulation. Public services and public investment. What is also missing is the role of public services, community empowerment and democratic control over essential services such as electricity is an important and individual empowerment of citizens. Remunicipalization has often helped to decrease costs for consumers. We know, not in each case, but we have the debate also in Germany about that, and I think it's a useful thing. When it comes to the energy market, we also need to alter EU competition law and the rules for the internal market for electricity to allow more flexibility in supporting socially orientated initiatives. Remember, Greece, where surplus from renewable on public building was used to benefit energy poor households, which was illegal under EU competition law. We have to debate about that. I also support your recommendation 1.1, in which you suggest that much more carefully monitoring, analysis, appropriate interventions in the process of energy prices formation are needed. You should also mention regulated prices. I remember the debate about the single market, energy market, but it was a very hot debate with not really good results. I agree with you that we need targeted support for improving the energy efficiency of houses. The most member states owners can pass the costs of renovation on to their tenants, which can price them out of their homes. We need to fix this. For the reason high quality social housing has to play a crucial role. Unfortunately, social housing construction has declined in many parts of Europe. Today I have read in the newspaper in Germany, also in Germany, the housing construction, social housing is declined. This is not a good result of the last years, and we have to discuss it. Yeah, and policy making, speaking on the Green Deal, I agree with you that considering social justice and environmental concerns together is important, and social consideration must play a much stronger role in the environmental policies. And also the debate about the subsidized green energy, and we should have that in the same way that we subsidized coal and nuclear power or gas, you think, PCI list, in the past. This is a big debate on the European level, and what we need is a social and environmental transformation of our society. The Green Deal has to reflect this consistently.
Okay, Cornelia, I think for the time being, you are already talking a lot on what we will take up in the second point. Really, it's very helpful. I would like to come back exactly to your European Green Deal very much in detail afterwards. You have mentioned already so many hooks also for policy work. If I can cut you now for the first round, and also really thank you for having reacted to the recommendation, to some of them, and having framed them, that's very helpful. But I bring you in later. So thanks a lot. It was is a lot of food of thought already. Obviously, other panelists can react to. So we go now, thanks Cornelia, we go now to the local level and to the Convent of Mayors for Climate and Energy, the world's largest movement for local climate and energy actions, I read. There is Giustino Piccolo is working there. He's also a project coordinator at Climate Alliance. So please bring in the insights and the comments on the project results and beyond. Giustino, the floor is yours, please.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Matthias. And first of all, thanks a lot for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here today. And it's also, I'm also a little bit sad because we have been following the ASSIST project through the years, and now it's reached an end. We're very happy to see these amazing results, but of course we are also a little bit sad that the project is finished. So thanks a lot for organizing also this conference in a virtual shape. As you said, Matthias, indeed I come from the Covenant of Mayors office, where I lead the work around energy poverty. Just a few words before touching actually on some of the points that were raised by Maria in the presentation before. So the Covenant of Mayors, for those that do not know, it's a movement of local and regional authorities that has started more than 10 years ago. Originally, we were focusing only on climate change mitigation with clear greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets. Now, and throughout the years, actually, the initiative has evolved. At certain point, we added what we call the second pillar, which looks at climate adaptation. And then recently, we have added another commitment, which we call the third pillar in the jargon of the initiative, which is the commitment that each city joining the initiative makes to provide secure, sustainable, and affordable energy to all citizens living within their municipalities. And this is important because one of the first point I want to touch upon from your recommendation is the policy integration and how we are linking the different policy areas to have basically a better policy framework that supports actions. What we have seen, and from the experience that we have in the Covenant of Mayors through the years, for us it's key to position actually energy poverty not as a policy area on its own, but to really try to streamline and to mainstream the attention to vulnerable population groups in all energy and climate policies. And this is for us, it's a very, very important element. And we believe that the local level is the best place actually to integrate such a policy and to take all the different people into account when they design their energy actions. And on this, I also very much liked the attention to energy efficiency that was raised also by Cornelia, because this is also for us, it's a key element. We really need to boost the energy efficiency, especially in the building sector, and we really need to bring all the people on board in these renovations and this more attention to energy efficiency, especially in the coming years. The second point that I want to touch upon is the point that was raised a little bit around the need for indicators, guidelines, training. This is something that we also believe it's really much needed, especially because there is such a diversity of approaches for energy poverty, and Europe is not one, let's say, we cannot find one solution that fits everybody. So there is clearly a much stronger need to provide indicators, to provide guidelines, especially in some of the let's say, areas of the policy cycle. For instance, we have noticed that there is a huge lack in the understanding of where energy poverty is within my municipalities. Who are the people affected? How do I identify them? Which kind of analysis I can perform to actually make sure that then when I design my actions, I reach to the people that are most in need. And this is something that we will take up in the coming months, years, actually. As a Covenant of Mayors office, we are going to develop a set of indicators also going in this direction. The second point related to this is the need of training. And this is something that you in the ASSIST project actually have done quite nicely. And we hope actually to see these results continuing also after the end of the project. And I was also pleased to hear the other day when we heard from the municipality of Parma in Italy that they actually taken already on board the approach of the ASSIST to actually continue this on the local level. training the different people that are actually at the interface with the inhabitants, the citizens, the population is key, because without this element, we don't go really far. The last point, and I hope I'm still in the 5 minutes, is about the transfer. And because it was one of the last points mentioned by Maria as well in the presentation, and this is something that, let's say, from Brussels, in a way we are struggling always a lot with. How to make sure that good practices, best examples, amazing approaches that have been developed in one country, in one region or another, actually are translated, are transferred, are replicated in other regions. I don't have an answer yet on this. We are trying our best. We also actually published recently a compilation of resources, try to collect different cases from the thousands of European funded projects on energy poverty, and try to basically, with this, we hope that cities will take on board these amazing approaches and these examples to take action. This is, for me and for us, it's still like a top priority, and it's something that should be strengthened actually in the coming years, also at the policy level from Brussels.
Okay, thank you, Giustino. You really were very much in the 5 minutes. Wonderful, and also thank you for focusing on outcomes of the project and taking them up from a local government perspective, and indicating to us, and I think that's good for those that were involved in the project, that have been involved in the project, to recognize their work and also the usefulness of project outcomes. But now what needs to be done, as you said, for example, still how to, for example, build up a set of indicators, how to identify energy poor, vulnerable consumers, but also then to target measures in a useful way and in a broader framework on which Cornelia already gave a lot of ingredients we will come back to. Thanks a lot, Giustino. So we now go to the social housing world, also a little bit the social economy, the NGO world, and I would ask somebody who know very well, a friend, Julien Dijol, who is policy coordinator at Housing Europe, and there obviously coordinates the advocacy work, also has a lot of experiences in a lot of projects around social housing, cohesion, energy, social development policies. So Julien, if you could also talk a little bit from social housing perspective on the project outcomes, where you see key recommendations that you would like to take up to underline, and then I bring in the Commission. Thanks. So please, Julien, your floor is yours.
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you very much for the invitation. Yeah, I think that the policy recommendation of the ASSIST project are very good. They are very interlinked, so very linked to one to another. So it's difficult to simply separate them and go from one to another and have an assessment. But I will focus particularly to the one related to the interaction between the different levels, because at the end of the day, when we discuss about energy poverty and energy efficiency, we have to discuss about indeed the local level, as Giustino just said. But we have to discuss also about how the policymakers at the national or EU level will be able to support the local level. And when we talk about social housing, we talk about the quality of homes, which is one of the factors identified to fight against energy poverty. And this local level is where we can support social housing providers in making the good approach in terms of energy efficiency and fight against poverty. And those approaches can be very different from one country to another. We can have, for instance, the support of renewable energy, so the use of PV to provide energy for the tenants at a lower cost. We can have also the promotion of what we call the one-stop shop, whereby the social housing provider will help to set up a one-stop shop for private homeowners in deprived neighborhoods. So this is also a very important role of social housing provider. We can have really good example of integrated renovation programs where we look at also the social impact, the health impact, and where entire neighborhoods have been actually refurbished, and people now are very proud of living there, while actually years ago it was a very difficult situation with high unemployment and really a lot of social problems. So I think there is no I mean, there's a big consensus about the fact that energy efficiency and energy poverty is one of the most local thing we can talk about when we do policy making. And yet, of course, the EU level has a key role to play. This key role is about ensuring, is about empowering, so supporting the variety of approaches at the local level. So they have to, the higher levels of policy making have to provide for stability of the legislative framework, of the regulatory framework, and not constant changes in terms of, for instance, energy standards. They have to provide for the right tools, like the citizens' energy communities or renewable energy communities, which will help indeed the provision of cheap local energy for the tenants. And they have to provide for the targeted support that indeed you mentioned in your recommendations, a target support on poor and households and low-income households. And this is a very important point. When we talk about what the EU can do in terms of structural fund support, we have to look at whether the tools will allow for a really true targeted support, and of course, whether the local level will be able to implement in the right way. And I will talk a bit in the second round about recent initiatives on the Just Transition Fund, for instance, but there's indeed a role in terms of making sure there's a coherence between the overall objectives and what the local level can do with those tools. And I think this interaction between the different levels is also something that will be able to deliver on the social justice and the fairness issue. And it's not something that is given. I mean, it's a very complex issue for policymakers, including the European Commission, because indeed you have on the one hand a market, which is an energy market, with a tax issue and things related to price, and on the other hand you have indeed the question of the right to energy, or energy welfare as you call it, and it's very difficult to bring the two together. We have, I mean, there's a lot of now studies which show the distributional effects of energy prices, and whereby the low income households are disproportionately hit by the energy prices. So this is something that we have to reflect on, that the European Commission has to reflect on, and more generally speaking about the way the different policies are going to the same direction, which is indeed social justice. And this is not easy, because ambition on the environmental side can sometimes face the reality of the social acceptance and social justice at the local level. So to finish with the first impression, social housing providers have been pioneers of the energy transition for years. And our main objective is to make sure that when we do renovate homes, when we do provide quality homes, we do it at an affordable level, which is without increasing the rent. But it's not easy. So we need indeed a social within grants and financial support, but we also need the right policy framework at the EU level. So this interaction between the different levels is crucial, and the main objective for the European Commission in a way would be to ensure that we have the way to empower the local level rather than to create more obstacles. So well done to the Assist Together project, because your policy recommendations are spot on and very, I think that it's something that the European Commission has really to study carefully, and we are happy to continue to discuss with you about all this in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Julien. Very helpful. Also, thank you for also going back a lot to the recommendations from the project and recognizing the use. And also, I mean, you have now very much linked already or shed the bridge to the European Commission with highlighting the need of supportive regulatory frameworks, both around energy markets, but obviously also around fairness, affordability of energy, reduction of energy poor prices, and also the support of social housing and what it means, a positive effect not only on the health, but also on the living conditions of those that live in social housing, which is also needed. Anyway, so that gives me the possibility in the first round, and Virginia reminds me, and rightfully so, that we are now with more than 100 participants, and if you want to ask questions to the panelists, then please use the question and answer the box, not a chat box. That it would be useful. But anyway, I give the floor now to Anne Weidenbach from the European Commission. She works in DG Energy, in the Energy Efficiency Unit, as a lawyer from a professional background and policy officer there. And indeed, focusing on bits and pieces you, Julien, already mentioned. I think also Giustino, Energy Efficiency Directive. Before she worked in Germany with the Bundesnetzagentur, so the federal agency regulating the networks, telecommunication, railway, post, but also energy and gas. So please, you already had some issues or have come on the table that also were directly addressed to the Commission. But please react a little bit to the project, Anne, first, and then you can obviously take up already points mentioned by Julien and others before. So floor is yours, please, Anne.
Yes, good morning. Thanks a lot. And thanks a lot for the welcome and inviting the Commission. And congratulations to this project. And I can imagine how much work you had. And I think it's a very important and very valuable input. And I think it comes at the right point in time. I would also be happy if it's possible, if or other participants would be brave and open enough also to share their views, because what we really need, and I think it's the same for Cornelia, it's the feedback from a local level, from other projects. There are a lot of good projects ongoing and already finished, but we must not lose track about all the valuable input. So I think that's also why I really appreciated to attend here. I think for me it's hard to say what is, let's say, the most important conclusion or recommendation to draw. I think they are all, there's not even one we should oppose, all are very valuable. I would like to focus a little bit more on the two you said, like improving the consistency of policy and ensuring better binding set of policy measures and initiatives at all levels. And I think the European Green Deal, which was proposed in December 2019, and also the proposal of the Commission for a Recovery Plan could be appropriate points for you to feed in these recommendations. And I think you've seen that also energy poverty, or to address the risk of energy poverty, is really highlighted. So it's clearly said we have to make the transition just and inclusive for all. I think this is very strong, and it shows that also the Commission recognizes it as one important point to tackle. The European Green Deal also highlighted that effective programs are needed, and I think also your assessment would also help to focus a little bit more what means effective programs. Also, what are effective financing schemes? One hook to feed in is not only the European Green Deal, and which means in fact that also the Commission will review and, if needed, revise existing legislation like the Energy Efficiency Directive or the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, or also product legislation, which is also important in this regard. But the Commission also committed to provide guidance to the Member States in how to address issues of energy poverty. So this work on providing guidance as a supportive tool to Member States is ongoing. But this is also, I think, one point of interest for the ASSIST project. To address the twin challenge of, and what you said already before, there are many, let's say, barriers. is to address energy efficiency and affordability, and also to avoid split incentives. What you mentioned, Julien, about increasing rents, this is a classical example for split incentives. How can we ensure that it's for the landlord on the one hand attractive to renovate houses, but on the other hand to avoid that people who live in these houses can still afford living in these houses. And I think this twin challenge can also be addressed by the renovation wave, which is now one of the flagship projects of EG Energy. So it's also one point where you could also feed in your recommendations. And as you might know, there will be soon a public consultation, because one important point is to see what are the barriers preventing member states from renovating houses, and what are good practices which should be shared and can easily be duplicated. So this is one point. And I would like to mention that there is also the current legislative framework, which also addresses energy poverty. As you know, member states are requested to, under the amended EED, to set up policy measures, for example, under the energy savings obligation, to address energy poverty, and with the national energy and climate plans, which have been submitted by almost all member states by the end of 2019, they had to assess if their countries have to face energy poverty. And I think this is also interesting what you mentioned at the beginning, Matthias, that it's not easy to define, and there's no one-fits-all way to define energy poverty, but there are important indicators. And also the national energy and climate plans show that almost all member states will set up measures to tackle energy poverty. So, and I think I will leave it here, just also to mention what is also an important tool is the Energy Poverty Observatory, which provides best practices and studies. And I think what you mentioned as main obstacles regarding the risk of energy poverty is also reflected there, but I think it's yeah, maybe you could also make the link to the EU Energy Poverty Observatory. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Anne, thanks a lot. You already went also as others, but there's no problem. I think it's even fine. It's even helpful. You already went into the second part, the current policy regulatory framework, the possible hooks. And I wanted also now to go into this. And you already took quite some of my introduction, because obviously we have the European Green Deal since December. We have the Just Transition Mechanism and different funds there. Julien probably will speak more about this. Just Transition Fund, Transition Scheme, other public sector loan facilities to help renovating buildings. You also mentioned, and perhaps you can come back to this where we are, because I think that's of interest for everybody, also for my own organization, where the Commission is indeed on this guidance on average energy poverty in the second round. If you can elaborate a little bit more, because I think we are interested how this is also what the governance is around this. You mentioned the clean energy package and the obligations of member states to define objectives to reduce energy poverty, and that they have to report on this. That are other hooks. So my second round, and I bring in one question that we already have from Hungary, but I think that's also Central Eastern Europe, and we know that countries there are suffering relatively more about energy poverty. And Georgi Sumegi asks a question also, especially linked the building structure in Central Eastern Europe, but also in other countries where there are multi-apartment buildings. So anyway, that's perhaps also for, in a way, for social housing, bigger apartment buildings anyway, and how to work there towards energy poverty measures that are successful in this context, not individual flats or whatever, but this type of arrangement, and when you also want to do renovation. So I would take this question already from the chat or from the question and answer. into this second round that is now really, and I start again with Cornelia, if you allow, is again, what are now the policy hooks and the different measures you would see that would be needed. You already spoke a lot, Cornelia, about regulation, legislation, funding, others about exchange of good practice or whatever. So please, Cornelia, another 5 minutes. We have about 20 minutes around. Another 4 minutes, perhaps, then we can wrap up about take up the points you had earlier on where are your hooks now to change the regulatory framework, the policy framework to reduce, eradicate, ideally, energy poverty. Please, Cornelia. You need to unmute you. Yeah, yes. You know,
okay. You would like hear something about some regulatory measures in the next time?
Yeah, exactly. Or what do you really say what is now the priority for the policy and the regulatory framework? You mentioned already a lot before when you talked about tariffs, when you talked about measures for energy poverty, for the right to energy, all these issues a little bit more. Okay.
Yeah. I think we have a lot open questions. One of the open questions is that we have no definition of energy poverty until now. We have discussed it year by year in a lot of files in the European Parliament, but it was not possible to come to a definition, but we need it. If we don't have that, then we cannot say, yes, okay, this poverty, and we have to help the people in this way. I remember one of my colleagues from Hungary, they told me, Connie, it's wonderful what you speak, what you say about the measures in the European Parliament, but we are in some regions in Hungary so poor that we have to heat with wood. And then we can speak about Green Deal and all other things, but we see we have a very broad problem with poverty, and one point is for me to have a definition. Second point is to have a concrete framework to support poor people to fight energy poverty. We think we have to discuss about regulated prices. We have to discuss about no disconnection, and this needs concrete measures. It needs a legal basis, and we should push that as one of the important points. And then the Green Deal. The Green Deal, yes, it's necessary. It's clear. We all want it, and some groups in the European Parliament wants a lot of things more, and this is okay. But we need a social component to include a social component in this Green Deal, and this is one of our points we have to claim in the next discussion, especially in the discussion of the climate law. You know, now we have the debate in the committees there, and I think we should do all that we can put this point in this climate law. When I come to the most important things, then I would like to say three. We need a right to energy, that I also have the possibility to have good weapons in my hand if I have a dispute. We need the definition of energy poverty and social consideration in the Green Deal. And we need also more subsidies for renewable energies and not for the fossil energies. This is an old debate. Yeah, the other things I think I
No, I think it's fine. You are very clear, Cornelia. I like a lot. I mean, what you say is very much also EAPN, the ban of disconnection, the right to energy, to affordable energy, with the right to appeal, as you also said, and questions around social tariffs. So I think that's very clear. That's very direct European level regulatory work that would need to be done. And I think also Timmermans, Commissioner Timmermans, in his hearing in the Parliament, he also said back then, we cannot raise energy bills. We have to lower them. 50 million energy poor is unacceptable. So, and also I think Anne referred to this in her introduction. So thanks for the time being, Cornelia. I go again to Giustino now. Please come in with your policy hooks. What needs to be done on the policy regulatory level? What can be done at European level? Please.
Yeah, thanks a lot. First of all, so I completely share the view of Anne actually. So do we have a policy framework that is, let's say, inspiring for action in the coming years? Yes, it's there, and we hope to see actually a better development also in the coming months and throughout the year. From the local level perspective, there is still like a lot that we would need. And I speak not only, let's say, for the local level per se, so for the cities, but also for the kind of support that the cities are receiving. And if you look, for instance, at the Covenant of Mayors, which is a very powerful instrument in translating basically complex European policies into instruments that the local level can use and things that actually the cities can use and can implement on the ground to make sure that the targets set at European and national level are actually met. In this regard, we do need more support. We do need more support to cities. We do need more support to initiatives, let's say pan-European initiatives that can actually channel things and guidance instruments to cities. I know that the Commission is already working on in this direction, and there is something that is going to come up in the coming months, hopefully with the great results around that. From our point of view, we are also tasked by the GNR actually to work on this and to develop indeed guidance that would support cities. However, we have to say that we are looking very much also on the policy development, so everything is linked. And what Cornelia also has said, we need certain things to be clear in the policy, let's say, framework at European level, so that we are empowered and we know what to do to actually transfer these instruments to the local level. At the local level, there is always a strong need of financial instruments, and especially when we look at energy poverty, there is there a key, really key and important role that public funds can play, because we are, especially in some countries, very advanced, let's say, on mobilizing private investments for energy efficiency. But when we look at energy poverty, there is still a huge gap. And a lot of cities throughout Europe, they really need a lot of support to understand how to design the best schemes to involve everybody. And social housing is one part, and I'm sure that Julien will cover that. But in a lot of other countries, actually, we know that energy poverty, people affected by energy poverty do not live actually in social housing. There is a lot of people that live in private owned houses in the rental market, and this is something important. We need instruments also financially to make sure that the renovation of those houses, of this building stock, is also done in a proper way, and it's also done to protect the people that are living within it. This is something that it's missing and could be done from the European level, but also through the regional funds and working with the different member states.
Thank you. I hand over to Julien, please, your reflections or recommendations or demands.
Yes, so I'd like to come back to one of the questions, so that because it will help me to illustrate the points. The questions about what do we do with the poor homeowners living in Central and Eastern Europe, because I mean, at the end of the day, we should not forget that 70% of the people in Europe are homeowners, and a lot of them are indeed low income. So basically, what can we do for them? For me, to put it a bit bluntly, we have two possibilities. We have first of all the possibility to force them to renovate and to put the money for that. So it's basically a lot of money, and I'm talking about grants, non-repayable grants, but this is very costly. It will be something that not necessarily will be optimal in terms of renovation, because you may put like a threshold saying that you ban all of the EFG apartments, and therefore you may certainly have a situation where you have a homeowners who decide to do the minimum to reach the level D, for instance. So we are talking about suboptimal situation and very costly. So this is an option is probably not the right option. The second option, the one that we favor, is really about focusing on municipal decarbonization strategies. So looking at the local level and how we can empower municipalities to do the right decarbonization strategy, not only looking at the buildings, but also the energy systems, but also public services, because energy poverty is really about also the lack of public services in many cases. And here the role of the Just Transition Fund is very important. Well, in theory, it could be very important, but at the moment, there is not a single reference to energy poverty in the Just Transition Fund proposal by the European Commission. So we are focusing on territories and how they can go from one type of economy to another, but without really addressing the question of energy poverty. So the JTF, the Just Transition Fund, can be very useful as long as it's recognized this. So to conclude, I mean, you have two paths. One is really considering that we can regulate homes like we regulate refrigerators or appliances or so on, but we forget that there are people inside. And the other path is looking at the municipalities as the driver, and we believe that this one is probably the best option. And I'm glad that actually Assist project is rather leaning towards this one.
Thank you. And before I give to Anne, I mean, I take up some comments, and then perhaps last also for Cornelia again, because it's linked to the parliament. But for Anne, I mean, there are questions also now coming. Is it useful to centralize the data collection on energy poor, or have on national level a centralized agency at member state, for example, responsible for coordinating the work on energy poverty? Julien was mentioning the lack of focus on energy poverty in current instruments, and a researcher from Italy, Matteo Mandelli, also asked about, again, the interlink that would highlight what Julien at the end said between the multi-dimensionality layer of this issue of energy poverty, the social aspects, exclusion, income aspects, obviously, and also the environmental dimension and the fair transition issue. So Anne, if you can react to this, and as I said, please, if you have more information on these guidelines, I think many would be interested in also how the project can the guidelines in the making. And then I have a last round, last question to Cornelia. Please, Anne.
Yes, starting with on the definition and if there should be a centralized agency watching it. I'm not sure if it should be, let's say, the first step to go. But I think what is, and this is our current work also, is you could have a look what member states plan to do in the national energy and climate plans. There you will see how energy poverty has been defined. I mean, it's just my personal view. I think that energy poverty can vary from member state to member state, and I think it's good to have to provide support what possible indicators could be used to define it. And before talking about a new agency, I think it's more important to see do member states implement properly what is required. This is a very first step, and it means they have to provide a definition of energy poverty. They have to assess if there is energy poverty. And for example, if stakeholders do not agree, they could get in contact with the respective member state. And this is one important point. I think it's really also the chance to support member states in doing a good job, to provide feedback to them what let's say policy measures are planned. If you think this is eligible, or maybe there are policy measures which are good, but some could be improved. So. And on the question, what you said, Julien, about homeowners, I think it's also worth to see what member states already did to provide or to get rid of split incentive. I know, for example, there's one member state who addressed this issue by changing their taxation law. For example, if you invest as a homeowner, that let's say you can either pay back by energy savings, or that you have advantages in taxation, for example. So there are already plenty of existing models. And just one quick feedback, what we see from the NECPs, for example, there are 15 member states who used an energy efficiency obligation scheme to address energy poverty, which is already something. There are also other policies, but under the energy savings obligation, there are also 15 member states seeing the need to use also Article 7 of the Energy Efficiency Directive to address this issue. There are also good points. On the renovation wave, as I said, you should use and pay attention to this process, to this initiative, because all you as project and also participants now should provide as much feedback as possible, because it's also meant to see what I said, what are to identify barriers. So you also identified structural barriers, information barriers, lack of understanding about energy poverty, to address market failures, lack of expertise or regulatory barriers. I think this is really an important hook for you to feed in to the process.
And perhaps the last point again to this energy, the guidance, where can you tell a little bit, if you can, where you are and how the project can help influencing still the shape of this and other actors? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a project. So chef de file is DG Energy, and it's the colleagues from the B3 unit. So we assist them as colleagues. And I would recommend to pay attention what colleagues will announce there. I know that we are very advanced with this guidance. I'm pretty sure that also during the Sustainable Energy Week, European Sustainable Energy Week, there will be something about one session about energy poverty, and I'm also sure that there is more information on the guidance. But just the process is not finished yet, or hasn't been finished yet. So I think to get in contact with colleagues from B3, I could recommend.
Thank you for this. We have still 4 or 5 minutes, and I would like to take, before I give it to Maria and Marina, and thank all the panelists. There is one question, and I think Cornelia was mentioning this, why I give it back to her. If you have 1 minute, Cornelia, there is a question on this climate law that is in the parliament indeed, and the question is if this should also include elements like the improved monitoring and reporting of the distributional impacts of the climate law, so obviously on energy poverty, and also what is about reporting obligations to member states. Anne mentioned already several others. Would you have any opinion on these 2 points in the climate law? And then I wrap up. If you have 1 minute, it would be kind of you. Please, thank you.
Yeah, very short. The climate law includes monitoring, yes, but energy poverty is not included. That's why we have to discuss it with the other groups and to look what we can do. This is really not easy, because this is an old debate from for a lot of years we have discussed it. But I think we can discuss it with the Greens and with the Socialists, and this is our idea to come to a joint position. Let's look. It will be a hard fight. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks really also for the different perspectives from the European Commission and insights from there, from the local level, very practical social housing, which is also a link between local level, obviously, and policies. The Parliament, thanks a lot for this insight, and I think the very positive feedback to the policy recommendations and proposal from the project. If Maria wants still to add something, then I would give her the floor for 1 minute, and then Marina to conclude. So thank you for having also asked EAPN to chair this session. I hope it gave some insights and food for thought and for the further work. I stop here, and if Maria wants to add anything, that then she should speak, and then I give it. Then please hand over to Marina to conclude for everything. Thanks for the time being.
Thank you very much. Thank you really very much for the different aspects that were proposed by the panelists. We'll have this in mind, and they obviously will enrich and precise the framework paper and fit in. I just wanted, because this is a misunderstanding, it's my fault, to pay attention. Thank you, Cornelia, for bringing attention to this. There is not contradiction between energy welfare and right to energy. We support right to energy. Energy welfare is an attempt to operationalize and to be supportive to. So I'll take special care this to be much more clearer in the framework paper. Thank you.
Thank you for being that precise on this last point. And now Marina, please, to finally conclude. Thanks a lot again from my side to all the interesting and helpful contributions. Marina.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you very much to all the speakers of today. Indeed, a lot of inputs, insights have been provided. There is still a lot to do, and we will be more than happy to collaborate to any further initiatives to work on energy poverty. We've heard about a lot of things today, empowerment of local actors, regulators, and other things. And the project is about to end, but there are future projects coming in the next, there's a deadline coming in September, so happy to work on all these aspects that were brought about today. Thank you very, very, very much to everyone and to the partners, and with this we end our 3 days of webinars. The project is about to end, but we will still all be working together, I'm sure, and meet hopefully somewhere in the near future. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you very much.